We have supposedly found one of the best values in Dynasty, according to Mr. Simon Denny. I hadn't told you this. Nathan's not here. This is Simon's last week. He'll be back in August, though, so make sure you say bye to Simon in the comments. But Simon's going to lead this video because he's done a lot of research on who he thinks might be the next steal in Dynasty Startup Draft, somebody that could increase in value a lot, and we're going to see if he can support his case. And he's going to have to try to convince me because I don't necessarily believe him yet. So do us a favor, show your support, make sure you like the video, and make sure you're subscribed as well. We're trying to get to 5K before opening day. So that means if you subscribe, you can help us out with that, and we can meet our goal. We really appreciate that. And today, I'm going to hand the floor over to Mr. Simon Denny. He's going to give us his little case here.
Yeah, I mean, let me just start out. Running backs going into their fourth year, when they don't have a fifth-year option, they got a lot to prove. Their team has no loyalty to them long-term if they haven't signed a contract extension, and they're not going to shy away from using them a lot. The best example of this is last year with Josh Jacobs, right? Yep. Josh Jacobs going into the last year of his rookie contract hadn't really done that much. I mean, he'd been a good running back that far in his career, but he did have a lot to prove, and he had to earn his next contract. He put up over 2,000 yards from scrimmage on 4.9 yards per carry. That was easily his career best. He had 53 receptions and 12 total touchdowns on the year, and that was 19.3 points per game. Now, the other player, the one that we're talking about now, he's proved even less than Josh Jacobs did, and that's going to be the problem here. That's going to be the question long term. But it's JK Dobbins. JK Dobbins was not a first-round draft pick like Josh Jacobs was. He was drafted in the second back 3 years ago already. This will be his fourth year on the Ravens. And so far in the NFL, especially other than him being injured, his biggest criticism has been his lack of receiving upside. The problem with that, in my opinion, I think it was Greg Roman. I think it was the old offensive coordinator. Last year in 2022, Lamar Jackson threw to Mike Davis, Kenyon Drake, J.K. Dobbins, Justice Hill, and Gus Edwards. So all of those running backs, he threw to them a total of 50 times. That's less than 3 per game.
Yeah.
17 games. 3 per game would have been 51. So he had less than 3 per game to each of those guys. Now, they have a new offensive coordinator out of Georgia, and that was Todd Monken. Last year at Georgia, Monken's RBs, so the running backs at Georgia, had a total of 74 targets through 15 games. That's almost 5 per game. So if you spread an extra 2 targets to a smaller running back committee in Baltimore, because Mike Davis is gone, Kenyon Drake is gone, Justice Hill's booty. Well, and really, so is Gus Edwards. But J.K. Dobbins is going to have a lot more targets, hopefully, if he shows he's prepared. And he can do a lot with those. In college, J.K. Dobbins had 71 receptions through 3 years. That's a lot.
That's a significant amount.
And 9.1 yards per reception.
That's over Nathan's threshold of 6.
We have a reception kind of. We want our running backs out of college to have more than 6 yards per reception.
Nathan saw that there was a trend with that where the better receiving backs, the ones that came in and it translated, had a yards per reception above 6 in college.
If you had yards per reception under 6, then you're not going to really be
Jameer
utilized.
Gibbs had 9. So
there you go. That's exactly what I was going to get at. So Jameer Gibbs had 9 yards per reception. And I'm not J.K. Dobbins is not Jameer Gibbs. He does not run routes the same way Jameer Gibbs does. But I'm saying he's shown proficiency in the receiving game in college. In the NFL, he's also been one of the best running backs in the league when it comes to pure rushing. He had a true yards per carry of 5.2 last year. That's 4th in the NFL. Even after being hurt, even after coming back, leaving to get a surgery, and then being not fully himself according to interviews, he said, I'm not back to normal yet. He had 5.2, 4th in the NFL. He was the second most elusive running back in the league according to his juke rate. And his breakaway run rate, which is a rush attempt with 15 yards or more, he was 3rd in the NFL. So this guy is incredibly efficient in the rushing game. And so that means when he's being thrown the ball, I don't even need him to go down the field. I don't need him to run routes. If he has like an Austin Eckler type receiving upside where he's just, they're checking the ball down to him, he can even be behind the line of scrimmage. He's shown that he's able to get the ball downfield when he's rushing. Why can't he do the same thing when he has the ball tossed to him,
True.
Not even thrown. Okay. They can just toss it to him. So, we're making a lot of assumptions here. We're assuming that he can turn his college receiving game into his NFL receiving game. But when it comes to all touches, J.K. Dobbins averaged 5.7 yards per touch. That was 9th in the NFL last year. So he like I said, we've read all these statistics. He's a very efficient running back. And you might say, what are you not buying here? I want to hear. Like, what are the questions that you're still having?
I think actually my biggest to your points so far. To your point, the Ravens did not draft a running back, and to me that is the biggest statistic in this whole thing, because I thought JK Dobbins was for sure getting replaced.
I did too.
The fact that the Ravens in a running back class that a lot of people thought was deeper than it actually was, but that being said, there were plenty of opportunities for them to draft a replacement for JK Dobbins.
The Colts drafted a running back.
Yeah,
and they have Jonathan Taylor. Like, the Ravens could have drafted someone.
I think my biggest so that's to your point. They didn't draft a running back. To your point, with ACL injuries and running backs, usually it's the year after the year, so 2 years after the injury actually happens where they bounce back. So here's my problem. I mean, JK Dobbins is already in his 4th year in the league, so he's going to have to earn a contract this year. So while there's a ton of upside and there's a ton of ceiling for picking JK Dobbins where he's at and taking a risk on him hoping he hits, the risk is amplified because if JK Dobbins gets hurt again, he is dead. If he does not do anything this year, he is dead. I mean, from a dynasty perspective, because then you're looking at his long-term contract situation.
He might get signed to a 1-year, $5 million contract.
I mean, he could be jumping around at that point, and that would just tank his dynasty value. So I think you are onto something in terms, especially from the offensive system, because when I think Greg Roman ran a very specific and distinct offensive system there that allowed for the tight ends to be very productive, and then it really hindered the wide receivers, but it also allowed for a very heavy committee in the running back position. I think Monken could be a guy that actually has a feature back, and if there's going to be a feature back in this offense, it's not going to be anybody besides JK Dobbins. So that is another very good point that I think the college reception stuff I think is very interesting. Again, I just think from a value perspective, this is riskier than some other picks because he is on that last year. Even if he had 2 years left on this deal, I feel a little bit better. Obviously, they could franchise tag him next year, but who's to say they don't just replace him in next year's draft?
No, I mean,
it's
a valid question.
It's risky. But I see it. I mean, and some of the metrics are there. I mean, some of the metrics last year where he came back in, and you could see like him starting to get a step back. But at first, he had lost some burst.
Oh, yeah.
You could tell.
He said it himself.
And you could really, really see it.
But I mean, I think the biggest thing we're hoping for here is that he has a breakout year. And just like Josh Jacobs, the Raiders saw, all right, we have something going here. We can run our offense through this guy. It takes a lot of pressure off of your quarterback. And Lamar Jackson, he's shown he doesn't really have the ability to be used in the rushing game consistently and stay healthy. 2 years in a row, he's been hurt.
True.
If J.K. Dobbins proves that he can stay healthy, the Ravens are going to want to push their offense through not only Lamar Jackson, but then they have J.K. Dobbins to lean on. And in that case, I think you're going to see a similar thing to what we just saw with Josh Jacobs, and that they might franchise tag him. Or, you go 3 years back with Alvin Kamara and Dalvin Cook and Aaron Jones and all of those guys getting long-term contracts. It's really going to inflate his value, and you'll be glad that you got him.
No, that's true. I mean, especially where he's going. The nice thing about investing in J.K. Dobbins is he's going in where do you see him going? Because I see him pushed up our mocks a little bit. So I don't want to.
I've seen him going anywhere from, I saw him go in the 5th and 1, which is too high for me. I'm not paying that, but anywhere from the 7th, 6th, 7th, 8th, somewhere in there, and oftentimes in there, I'm comfortable taking a running back with upside.
Yeah, I 100%. I this is tough. I get it, and a lot of the notes you have on here are very convincing. The fact that he's that cheap is really what's probably going to sell it for me. But let's talk a little bit about how we can be buying J.K. Dobbins, because I think if we're going to convince people, and you should let us know in the comments what you think. Simon has put together a very compelling argument, and it's actually made me kind of rethink my stance on this. I want to know what you think as well. So drop the comments. But how can we acquire J.K. Dobbins? What are you paying for J.K. Dobbins? Realistically.
I mean, I really think in a lot of leagues you can go out there and you can put 2 seconds. You can put 2 seconds out to whoever owns J.K. Dobbins, and I think there's a good chance it'll get accepted because people are saying he's not consistently stayed healthy. He has missed 24 games in the NFL due to his knee injuries.
Yeah.
People might be wary. They might say, I'm taking a single second for him. And honestly, before I did this research, I was trying to figure out if I was out on J.K. Dobbins as well. I owned a lot of him, and I was like, all right, am I going to go start trying to get early seconds in the 2023 class? and re-roll. But I would easily pay a single second, and I think there's owners who would accept that.
I would pay that easy.
I think there's plenty of owners who would accept that. Honestly, I think 2 seconds I'm still willing to pay because who are you getting in the second round? They're often dart throws.
Yep.
JK Dobbins also a dart throw here, but he's shown that he can be efficient in the NFL.
Decent dart throw, yeah.
I'm saying guys like Joe Mixon who have question marks. I think you can go out and maybe get JK Dobbins 1-for-1. I think Rachaad White, who's a guy who's in a similar position. He's the only running back in his own backfield, but Rachaad White has been horribly inefficient. If you can switch Rachaad White for JK Dobbins 1-for-1, people just want the shiny new toy, the guy who's in his second year. I'm easily doing that. I think you can look at guys like DJ Moore, Terry McLaurin, guys who, they're getting to the older side. They've never actually produced to an elite level. They don't have quarterbacks who have shown that they can throw the ball and help their wide receivers produce on an elite level. I think you could sell for specifically those two, DJ Moore and Terry McLaurin for JK Dobbins plus. You might get a second on top there too. And I think, you look through, there's a lot of people who are looking to get out on JK Dobbins before the season starts. They're scared. They're scared he'll get hurt again. What happens if he finishes his fourth year and doesn't have a long-term contract? I think there's going to be a lot of panicked owners.
I think the other thing is, as far as the contract situation, it is possible that he has a good year this year, or at least a decent year, and then the Ravens can bring him back for cheap, and they believe in him long term. So there's also that part of it. In terms of trading from in Dynasty, I think this is my advice, I think here, and this is because this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to see how cheap I can get him. I'm going to throw out some pretty...
Single second, start there.
Yeah, I'm going to start with feelers and although I'm not necessarily a throw out feelers guy, because a lot of times that's just a stupid excuse for making bad trade offers. Yeah, it just is. In this case, J.K. Dobbins has a very large range. There's a lot of variability in terms of where he could be going. A lot of people will value him like Simon does, and they really believe in him. There are a lot of people that are just completely out on J.K. Dobbins. And I was one of them, admittedly, until Simon has convinced me to rethink my stance. So with J.K. Dobbins, again, the hope there is going to be that he comes out and he balls out this year, that he picks up some significant receiving upside as well, because honestly, that's probably where he could pick up, if he can turn into a capable receiving back.
If he gets 40 receptions in a year, I'm absolutely so pleased with that. I couldn't even begin to describe it.
And looking at his, I'm going to look at his game log, because I remember at the end of last year, he sneakily had some games. And although the Ravens were without Lamar Jackson, he had some games where it was that's actually a decent stat line. Looking at his game log here, in 2022, it was week 14, I guess is the one I'm thinking of. He had 15 attempts for 120 yards and a touchdown. I think that was the game he maybe had that really long touchdown. But then he had 13 fantasy points after that. He was RB19. He had 13 rushes for another 125 yards. No touchdowns there.
Look at his rushing efficiency.
Yeah, that's 8 yards per carry in the last 4 games. 8, 9, 5, and 5.5. So that's pretty good. The problem was, again, he's getting 12 and 13 carries in weeks 15 and 16. He's got to get more than that. And the other thing is, he's got to be able to produce without scoring a touchdown. In his 2 games where he scored a touchdown this year, he had 22 points and 18 points. And outside of that, his highest games were 13 points and 9 points. So that is another thing you can look at and say maybe he's a little bit touchdown dependent. He has to be able to, and again, that's the Kenneth Walker conundrum. You have to be able to be stable in the receiving game to have that higher floor in fantasy and dynasty, especially if you want to talk about going in the top 5 rounds of a startup. So interesting. Let us know what you think in the comments about J.K. Dobbins, whether you agree or disagree. Clearly you could see I'm on the fence, but I'm thinking now. So it was very well put together. Do us a favor, show some support, and make sure you like this video for us, and make sure you subscribe to the channel, even if you don't agree with this video. It's good to hear things you don't agree with. I love it when people say, I'm unsubscribing because I don't agree with that. You really can't hear something that you don't 100% agree with. It's good to hear other viewpoints. You can call us stupid, but
you even didn't agree with me, and you just say, well, okay, made me think.
Yeah, and I actually kind of do agree with you now, I think, but I think it's going to depend on how cheap I can get them in certain leagues. So make sure you like and subscribe. We really appreciate you guys watching and joining us. We'll see you later.